Good morning. Real honor to be the opening act at this year's edition of the Bangalore Literature Festival, and it's it's a book that we at HarperCollins have published, and I I joined publishing in the year 1997. I was just telling Rom this story backstage, and so publishing houses have this weekly ideas meeting where you discuss projects that are sort of if you had the world at your feet, which is the one book that you would like to publish. And I said Whitaker's memoir. And this was 1997. And obviously it didn't happen then, but earlier this year, in January of 24, it did happen, and we have the first volume of Rom's memoir out there, Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. These are early years. Volume 2 will be coming, hopefully soon, and maybe there'll be a volume 3 as well, we don't know. There are those of you who have had a chance to read the book already, know how full of stories it is, how anecdotal it is, and how much of a page turner it is. And there are going to be that many more stories in volume 2. But today we'll focus on volume 1, which is the book at hand. And want this to be a really freewheeling conversation. I'll leave the talking to Rom and to Janaki and try not to get in the way too much. And we'll ask Rom to read as well a little bit from the book. So to start with the question that this is a memoir of your childhood and youth. You are, of course, now renowned as perhaps India's leading conservationist, a legendary figure in the field of conservation. How early did this interest start? When you were a kid, and the book, of course, starts when he's a kid. Were you interested in creatures other than human from a very, very early age? How did that interest take shape? Are there memories from there, stories from there that you could share? All questions are directed to both of you, please. So please pitch in, Janaki, whenever.
Yeah, as the book relates, I was 4 years old when I brought my first snake home. I was in northern New York State with my mother and sister, and we lived in a country house, and I used to go out and turn over rocks and catch worms for fishing and stuff like that. And one rock I turned over had a snake under it, and I brought it home. Luckily, it was non-venomous. That's why I am happily still alive and still here. And I had a remarkable mother, probably the weirdest mother you could imagine, because when I brought the snake home, she said, "Wow, how beautiful." How many mothers would say that? I mean, most mothers say, "Get that thing out of here." And she said, "How beautiful." What an impression that must have made in my little 4-year-old mind. And it never went away. I'm still fascinated by snakes, and that's taken me, set me going on the long trip that I took. I mean, 76 years later, I'm still enamored of snakes.
So Ram is very affectionately called the Snake Man of India, and Salim Ali, of course, is supposed to be the Bird Man of India. We'll come to Salim in a bit. You've met him, so we'll come to that later in the conversation. In snakes in particular, was there an early interest? Because you came to India first when you were 6 or 7 years old? 8 years old. 8 years old. This is 1951.
51.
Yeah, 1951. Were you in? So you're coming in from America, where snakes are seen maybe a little differently than in India, where they're worshipped as well as feared, right? Was that an early perception?
I don't think I realized what was going on. I was just a kid. I was just a young kid.
Right.
But the fact that the first snake people I met in India were snake charmers on Juhu Beach in Bombay, and then Bombay. And well, they told me lots of lies about snakes. The two-headed ones, Jai maine us taraf jata hai, or Jai maine is taraf jata hai, you know, and this sort of, what? And so I almost believed some of the stupid stories. But at least they, you know, they had an interest in snakes. And then I started, when I visited a temple, I would see carvings of snakes. And all of this, I mean, for a kid coming from the United States, from northern New York State, to a city as wild as Bombay was and still is, can you imagine that? I was freaked out. And you know, snakes were still very much a part of my life, but in the city, there wasn't much opportunity. That came later when I went to school up in the Nilgiris and the Palni Hills, when I got out into the wilds. But yeah, what a fascinating life to start out with. I mean, it was just great. I was just excited by everything.
So coming in from New York City, I mean, you wouldn't have encountered snakes in New York City at all, right? Outside of maybe the Central Park Zoo.
No, but I went to the Natural History Museum.
Right.
My mother would take me there, and dinosaurs.
Yes.
I mean, you know, the original reptiles of the world. I mean, most kids are fascinated by dinosaurs, and I was too. So it's all very closely related.
Right.
Mammals, they're okay, but they're a bit smelly and furry. But reptiles, wow, clean, smooth, beautiful.
You want to tell us a little bit about, there's this one story in the book which is absolutely, once you've read it in the book, you'll never forget it, which is that he went to school in Kodaikanal, and he had a pet snake at that point at home, and when he went to school, obviously he didn't want to leave it behind, so took it with him to school, where of course snakes or other similar creatures were forbidden. So he found an ingenious way of, ingenious as in it basically stayed under his bed. So you want to tell us a little, is that one of the passages you're reading? Otherwise, if you'll tell us the story of it.
Yeah, it still kind of amazes me that I got through it, because the house mother, if she did know about this, the python, she never said anything. And the ladies who cleaned the rooms and stuff, I begged them, look, don't touch that box under the bed. That's my personal stuff.
Right.
That's the way I put it.
Yeah.
So the python lived under the bed, but I had to take it out and sun it. So I would very surreptitiously take it out and pretend that I was lying in the sun and on a nice bedspread. And underneath the bedspread was, of course, my pet python. Yeah. And it grew and grew, you know. After it reached sort of 6-7 feet long, it became a little more obvious. Yeah. But man, I don't know if you could do that in this day and age. I guess I was just a very lucky kid.
So whenever somebody walked by, you'd basically cover it up.
Flip it over. Nothing, just me.
And what did you do for food for the python?
Oh, that was easy. I set rat traps behind the kitchen.
Right.
There was a garbage dump and plenty of rats. So yeah, I was a real hunter, and you know, setting traps is part of the hunting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to, before you read the first passage, I wanted to ask about that many conservationists have, of course, over time, they've evolved from hunters to protectors of animals. Jim Corbett is a great example. How did that work? I mean, you started out as a hunter. I mean, even when you're interested in birds, you were obviously shooting birds.
Instead of a bird watcher, I was a bird shooter.
Right, yes. And times have changed. Times have changed. When we talk about this in 2024, many of us might not be aware how the times have changed. And the interest in wildlife or wild creatures or creatures other than human often, it was linked to, we're talking about the 1950s and 60s, it was linked to knowing more about the various species, and that involved actually getting hold of them. How do you get hold of them, right? So that's, how do you think times have really changed in that regard? I mean, people still do capture birds and shoot them, though it's illegal.
Yeah, no, it's not so much nowadays, because nowadays you've got fantastic camera gear, and so you go out and take pictures.
Right.
Which is interesting that this is how Jim Corbett sort of, from a tiger hunter, he became a tiger photographer and actually studied tigers, and we learned a lot about tigers thanks to his observations. So getting out into the field, and you know, I read all, of course, Jim Corbett's books when I was a kid, and not only Corbett, but a lot of the African hunting books. So I was one of many, many kids who were very interested in hunting. I think the key thing was that it brought us out into the forest.
That's right.
And started
That's
this
right.
incredible fascination, because every time you're in the forest, you see stuff that you want to learn more about, so you read more about books, or you talk to hunters, other hunters, and especially local people whom I learned Tamil rudimentarily when I was a kid, so I met tribal people and hunters and learned a lot from them. This was the wonderful part of growing up there.
But hunting still continues in many indigenous communities. It might
That's
have
right,
died out in
right,
the
yes.
middle class, urban people going out and hunting animals, but it still is a way of life for many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we have designated hunting seasons and so on. But even outside of that, among the indigenous populations, as you say, I mean that's a source of food, right? So that's how Janaki, how do you feel the whole lens on conservation has changed over the last, say, however long you've been involved? It's been a long time. So.
Well, it isn't all that long. So even when I was growing up, I was reading conservation-oriented books.
Yes.
And Jim Corbett was some ancient past.
That's true.
So
yes,
it wasn't a period that my generation could relate to very much. So already that change had happened in urban situations. But I guess with communities like the Irulas or in the Northeast and in central India, hunting is still a way of interacting with nature. That's how people understood animal habits, behavior, wove their stories into their mythologies, their creation stories. So it's still, I think, still a valid way of living. It's just that the current laws don't allow people to do it openly. It becomes you're a poacher if you touch any animal. And the laws are getting more and more stringent.
Yeah.
So it's...
Okay, I don't think in this session we want to get too much into this, which is outside of the book, but I do want to ask you this, both of you, that do you think the laws currently are more urban focused rather than inclusive in terms of, I mean, it's a country of 1.4 billion people.
I don't think they were ever inclusive.
I know it's a provocative question, so yeah.
I'm just going to answer it very shortly. It's just getting more and more restrictive, not just for communities, even for research. Research is going to be much, much harder to do as with like a new amendment has happened, and all I'm hearing researchers say is, how are we going to get permission to conduct research? So both the good things and the bad things are uniformly being struck down by a law. So it's going to be much, much harder, no matter however you're going to relate to wildlife, it's going to be much harder.
Right. Okay, it might be a good time to, I mean, this is a real opportunity for us to hear Ram read from his book. So, Ram and Janaki, of course. So, yes.
Let Janaki.
Let Janaki read. Okay, great. Yeah. So, we'll do one passage and then we'll come back to more questions.
So, this is a section from his early life. The year is 1960. He's just graduated from school in Kodaikanal. He's still 16 years old, and his mother feels he's too young to go to college in the States. So for that 1 year, he is in Mysore volunteering or apprenticing at a taxidermy studio. And on weekends, he goes to Mysore Zoo and helps the keepers. So this is the time. 2 Europeans arrived at the zoo. Albert Meems, whom I assumed was German, sourced Indian animals for clients in Europe. It was only while writing this book that I discovered he was a Dutch spy for Nazi Germany during the Second World War. But by all accounts, the overweight gentleman was inept at espionage. According to a fellow spy captured by the Allied forces, Meems was to report on military matters but knew too little about the subject to be effective. In Mysore, however, he was very much the animal dealer, negotiating deals for European zoos. I became friends with a younger guy, Dieter Rinkel, who was an elephant keeper at Hanover Zoo, owned by Hermann Ruher, a German animal dealer who operated several zoos in Europe and had a long association with the Mysore Zoo. Dieter had 2 months to train 6 young elephants before taking them by ship on a 7-week voyage to Germany. After my affectionate romps with a leopard on weekend mornings, I arrived at the elephant paddock to greet Dieter and help Chinnaya, the head keeper, feed the 5 calves. The 6th would join the group later. By that time, Chinnaya and his assistants had kneaded ragi flour mixed with chunks of brown sugar and laced with vitamin powder into cantaloupe-sized balls. After feeding, I helped the mahouts bathe the calves and walk them around the grounds. The young elephants loved these sessions since they were cooped up in small, boring stalls most of the day. I picked up a few words of Kannada from hobnobbing with the keepers. Although the elephant calves were tame, I learned an important lesson. I was squeezing past Chintu, a chest-high calf, when she leaned, pinning me to the wall. My few strangled ugh, ugh sounds weren't loud enough to attract attention. I couldn't push her, and my chest hurt. If she didn't ease off, I could be in serious trouble. Dieter came by then and pushed the elephant back with the ankush, a bull hook for elephants. "You do cough, Ram," he scolded. "She doesn't know her own strength and could have crushed you. That's why you shouldn't get between an elephant and a wall." That experience taught me never to lower my guard around any wild animal, even if it was tame.
Excellent. I think that gives us a kind of a taste of what the book is like. It's a joy to read, and you know it's built on experiences garnered over decades. But it's just in the telling, it's just amazing. It's like I said at the beginning, it's a page turner. As you see, that it's a reasonably sized book. It's not a slim book, but I mean, I remember when I read the manuscript, thankfully it was a weekend like this one, and I started on a Friday evening, and by Sunday morning I was done. I couldn't put it down. It was just like that. And I think anybody who's read it is waiting with bated breath for volume 2 now. So I wanted to shift the topic a little bit from wildlife to India. You first came to India in 1951, and as a boy. And India was at that point, of course, just freshly independent, 1947 and 1951, 4 years after independence is when you first came to Bombay. And here we are in 2024. How do you think, 2 questions. Impressions of Bombay from 1951, which you capture wonderfully in the book, so please read it there. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about what Bombay was like coming in from New York City. How would you compare the cities? And question 2, which I'll leave both with you, and then you can answer both. How has India changed, other than getting hugely more populated in other ways?
As I said earlier, I'd come from a calm little village in northern New York State to this wild city. And I think the thing that amazed me is that children were running around and crossing the street without their parents holding their hands, and all sorts of things that didn't happen in the United States. I mean, what was going on here? But it was very exciting, obviously. But I wasn't aware of the family that I had entered, for one thing. My stepfather, Rama Chattopadhyay, was the son of Kamala Devi and Harindranath. These were 2 eminent people. But, you know, when you're a kid, eminent people, you know. And my stepfather, Rama, started a big color processing laboratory in Wortley, a part of Bombay. And all these movie stars, Raj Kapoor and Nimmi and Vajanti Mala and all that, used to come there to watch their rushes and stuff like that. And I'd be sitting in the theater next to some of these big stars, never thought to ask for an autograph or anything like that. It was totally lost on me. So in a way, I was a real oddball, I guess. I mean, I was this blonde little kid. I used to run around the beach without a shirt on, and just in my bathing suit. So my skin turned really dark, but my head, of course, just turned whiter and whiter. So I must have been a real weirdo. But I learned a bit of Marathi, so I learned, I had fun playing with the fishermen kids. Then we moved from Juhu Beach to Wortley, which was right into the city. And then I became a real city slicker, so to speak. And luckily, Wortley Sea Face was a place where I sort of, played in the tidal pools and stuff. So I was always somehow attracted to the wildlife wherever I could find it. Yeah. And then I was sent off to school. I mean, for a couple of years, I didn't go to school. Wow, it was just great, living on the beach. I was a real beach bum at the age of, 8 or 9 years old. But then I did have to go to school, which was quite a drag. I mean, I was never much of an academic.
Physically in a school, but I don't think he was in any class. He was out catching things.
Most definitely. That was fun. So,
tell us a little bit about that, about school and sort of not wildlife hunting trips, but wildlife discovery trips rather. I mean, there was a lot of roadkill, right? Which you would then pick up and then stuff. So,
yeah. Well, besides the bird hunting, which I did, what was interesting is that I would shoot a bird and kind of feel bad about it, but at the same time, it just seemed sort of natural in a way, and I would eat the doves and pigeons that I shot, so at least I was doing something with them. But then I went to a museum at Shambhaganur near Kodaikanal, and I saw all these stuffed birds, and the guys who were, they used taxidermy to stuff the birds and put them up in the museum. And one guy, one of the brothers there, Daniel, was very interested that I was so interested, and he said, so I was telling him about the birds that I was shooting. He said, instead of just shooting them, why don't I teach you how to skin them, and they can contribute to science. And here's a boy, I think I was about 12 or 13 by that time, and I thought, wow, that's a very interesting idea. So there was a purpose in killing the birds. And I think that was my little entry into the science part of things.
I just wanted to add a footnote to that. I think throughout Ram's childhood, there are all these adults who just conspire to, steer him in this direction. Like, okay, so it begins with the mother, and then there is brother Daniel, and okay, so how does he shoot birds? So there is this other guy with whom he has this agreement that he's underage, he can't own a firearm. He's getting a shotgun from this guy. I mean, can you imagine anyone doing that? And then later on, his school principal and teachers, they argue for him to keep his air gun in his dorm, how to get him passed from one grade to the next by offering him all kinds of typing classes. You pass this class and you can graduate from school. I mean, which adult would do that to any kid these days? It's just like a whole constellation of adults have just fit into his life at all the crucial places and moments.
Obviously a conspiracy.
Obviously. A good conspiracy, so yes. Would you like to read another passage? We would love to hear some more.
Yeah. I'm going to jump all the way to the United States. After I graduated from high school, I went to the United States in 1961, ostensibly to go to college. I didn't. I did a whole year and flunked out. So I'm not going to delve any more into the my lack of academics, because that's pretty obvious. I can barely speak good English. But I wanted all the time that I was in the United States for that 6 years to get back home, back to India. And so then I got drafted into the US Army during the Vietnam War. And luckily, I didn't have to go and kill anybody or get killed. I was a medical lab technician. Anyway, you'll read all this when you see the book. But to get back to India, I had to make $500 to get a ship ticket. And the only way I knew how to make money was to catch snakes and sell them. So I was in Arizona, where there are a lot of rattlesnakes. I walked carefully across a massive rock slide, alert for the soft buzz of a small rattler. At the first sound of one, I excavated the rocks, but the rattle grew fainter. The snake had retreated inside. I had to be faster next time. Careful not to start a rock slide, I made my way. Another snake disappeared under a flat rock. On lifting the stone, I caught sight of a slate gray coil near my hand. Too late. The small lance-shaped head of a green rock rattler shot out and bit me deep into my left thumb. You dumb shit, I berated myself. My thumb burnt like hot iron drilling into flesh. This was no dry bite. Although in pain, I wanted the snake. I grabbed it with my tongs and dumped it into a bag, not knowing how bad the snake bite was going to be. I didn't waste any time in this remote spot and retraced my steps for the 3-hour hike back to Nell's barn where I was staying. Exhausted from the agony, I slumped beside a stream and drank deeply. I made an improvised sling with a bag for my throbbing hand and rested in the shade of a tree for a few minutes. The swollen thumb had turned blue like an overripe fruit, stiffened and oozed fluid from puncture wounds. I wiped it with a damp handkerchief and tied it loosely around the bite to keep the flies away. My small medical kit contained no painkillers. I did, however, have a stash of marijuana. I tamped a thimbleful into a corncob pipe for a smoke. The familiar high took the edge off the agony. I felt better enough to continue on my way. About a mile later, I began sneezing non-stop, which made me even more tired. Then my armpits, crotch, and head started itching. I had no time to dwell on this new, unfamiliar symptom of an allergic reaction to venom. The distance passed in a blur. The sneezing abated, but I continued to scratch as if bedeviled by fleas. A parked car stood in Nell's yard, and the sound of people's voices came from the house. If her guests saw my puffy face with a snotty nose, while I raked my privates like an uncouth simpleton, they would run a mile. I stumbled behind the barn without being spotted and sat under an apple tree with my back resting against the trunk. Sweat trickled from my brow and my shirt was damp. I toked on the corncob pipe, which eased the pain. 2 snake bags stuffed with dry leaves made good pillows, and I stretched out, gazing into the branches. I sank into a deep sleep, listening to redstarts warbling among the overhead foliage. On waking up, I had no sense of how much time had gone by, since my watch had busted long ago. A troop of quatamundis surrounded me, chewing on fallen apples. Am I hallucinating? They kept a wary eye on the prone human. When I propped myself up into a sitting position, they scattered and watched me from a distance. The swelling had now reached the elbow, a deep, dull ache that throbbed. The throb with my pulse replaced the burning pain. I peeked around the barn. The car had left, so I knocked on the door and told Nell about my bite. My swollen arm concerned her, and she urged me to leave for the hospital. The nearest one at Bisbee was an hour's drive away, and my last excruciating experience at Beaumont Hospital lingered in my memory. It was a tiny snake, I reassured her. It couldn't be dangerous. The swelling has stopped. It's not even painful anymore. I'll be fine. It doesn't look good, she said. Anyway, you better stay in the house instead of the barn. After we had a sumptuous dinner of deer steak and baked potatoes, she pointed me to her guest room. At night, I got up in the pitch dark to take a leak, but lost my balance and fell down. I was blind. 100 worries assailed me as I lay there. I should have taken Nell's advice and gone to the hospital. Now it's too late. Should I call for help? Am I dying? Or should I ask her to drive me to Bisbee? Well, I had already worried her enough. So I just sat up paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. About an hour later, my vision started returning. It's like an old TV set warming up. The nightlight and the furniture were blurred at first, and then they came into sharper focus. Unsteadily, I stood up and leaned against the wall, waiting for my balance to return. I staggered into the bathroom, and then I returned to bed. I woke up to birdsong and the morning sun streaming in through the windows. I was still alive.
Amazing. So a snake bite, I think a lot of us know this. Some of us have suffered them. A snake bite from a venomous snake and the after effects of that is probably one of the most painful experiences that a human being can undergo, right? And how many times have you been bitten?
We usually don't answer questions like that. We always say...
Are we saying in the hundreds or thousands?
No. Well, maybe by non-venomous snakes, sure, hundreds,
Sure,
literally hundreds.
Sure. Yeah.
But venomous snake bites, I've had 6, and a couple of them quite serious. We usually say that if you're bitten by a snake, you're dumb, clumsy, and stupid, and it shouldn't have happened. And this is my sort of lesson to people who want to start handling snakes. It's no badge of glory to be having bitten by a snake. It means that you've done something really dumb, and you've disrespected the snake. That's a very important part of it, too.
I think part of it is also understanding basic snake behavior patterns and psychology, right? I mean when you're upsetting a snake is when they're likely to
Most definitely.
Yeah. Tangential question here, which I quickly wanted to ask. So, I mean, thousands of people, maybe probably more, I don't have the exact data, die in India every year from snake bite, especially in the rural areas, right? Are we getting better at
Things are getting
anti-venom and
better
so?
because we know more about it. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but when we started looking at government statistics about 10 years ago, and the government of India's statistics from hospitals said that about 1,500 people were dying of snake bite every year, which is serious enough. But I joined something called the Million Death Study from the University of Toronto, from the Global Health Center, with the Registrar General of India, in something called the Million Death Study. That is going to 1 million households with social workers and doctors and finding out just how many snake bite deaths there really are. You know what the figure is? 58,000 men, women, and children are killed by snakes every year in India. We are the snake bite capital of the world. We've got to do something about it. And, being a guy who's been promoting how great snakes are, yeah, right, you were crazy. You can't love snakes. They're killing so many people. But this is a great time for an argument. If you like snakes, if you want to appreciate the fact that they're an important part of our biodiversity, that they're rodent control, everything, you've got to do something about snake bite. And this has been my big crusade over the last few years.
One final question that I do want to ask you, and then we'll open it up to the audience because there are a lot of people here. I'm sure they'll have questions. Any advice for upcoming budding conservationists in India today? What are the challenges and what are the joys? I mean, the joys we talk about in the book, of course, but wanted to hear from you again.
Yeah, I don't think I have to extol the joys of it because everyone who loves nature wants to get out there and do something. The opportunities nowadays are fantastic. When I was first starting out with the Madras Snake Park, for example, in 1969, people would come to the snake park and, snakes, Well, whether they like them or hate them or whatever, they were all interested in them. And some of very eminent conservationists started their careers at the Madras Snake Park. Satish Bhaskar, who was a fantastic sea turtle man, and Dhruvajyoti Basu, who was so important for the conservation of gharial. Vijaya, who was one of India's first female herpetologists, started their careers at the snake park. So I just feel so proud that so many people started out then. And for people interested in wildlife today, there are so many wonderful opportunities, both academics, which I'm still a little bit shy of, but there are academic opportunities as well as opportunities in non-government organizations. And I encourage you to go all the way and grab a hold of it. I know your parents want you to be an engineer or a doctor, but just say no. I'd rather be a conservationist.
Yes. Brilliant book. Please get yourself a copy. Please read it. When I read it the first time, it reminded me of Gerald Darrell's My Family and Other Animals, because this is a childhood and youth memoir. The second volume, which is forthcoming, will have a lot of the snake park in Madras, which he mentioned, the Crocodile Bank, your work with the Andaman and Nicobar Preservation Society. All of that will be coming up. But this book is it's a gem of a book. Please get yourself a copy and read. I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions from the audience. Yeah, in the back there, if you can get a mic there, please.
Hello, good morning. My name is Tej. One of my best memories of your work is the film Dost Magarmach, which I saw as a kid. And it was simply amazing. It opened our eyes to, crocodile. So do you think the time is ripe to have a Dost Magarmach 2 or probably re-release that film to, reset the whole image around reptiles and crocodiles?
I'm glad you're saying that, because I was so proud to be a filmmaker. That was just part of my career. But I was totally absorbed in becoming a filmmaker. And the Children's Film Society, then headed first by Amul Palekar and then by Jaya Bachchan, gave me the opportunity to make this, to be a feature film director in Tamil. I mean, probably a few Americans might have done that, but I don't know of any. But anyway, the film is about a little boy who makes friends with a crocodile. And the story is good because it just shows that one village kid sort of convinced all the other village kids that crocodiles are actually not such evil people. And people. And we should do a much smoother, better version of Dost Magarmach, or The Boy and the Crocodile.
Yeah, a re-release itself would be great, because
Thank you.
I just love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Leo. So every Indian god had given a space to snakes. Lord Shiva had given a space to snake in his neck, and Lord Vishnu had been laying on the snake. So I think you are the snake man of India. Which space would you like to give to snake in your body?
I think I've done, and I'm still doing what I always. I became sort of a missionary. I hate to say the word even, but to teach people that snakes are innocent animals. They're not angry at us, and they just want to stay away from us. Snakes seem to know that we are very dangerous animals, and I try to teach people, look, snakes are not out to get you. They eat rats, they eat mice, they help to control them. So they're just a wonderful part of nature. Yeah. I think that's my job in life.
I'll answer for him. It's his heart.
Yes, please.
My question is for Janaki ma'am. So back in the day when you used to write your column, My Husband and Other Animals in the Hindu, that was the highlight of the newspaper. I used to open the Hindu magazine to read that column, and I loved your book. Are you going to start writing that again? Are you going to continue?
Oh, I don't think so. I think it had its time in my career, and I don't think I can do a column now because the pressure is on for the second volume. So that's the focus.
But that was a wonderful way of introducing a person like me to Rom's work, and it was my introduction to his work, actually.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Can we take one last question, please? We are just about out of time.
You,
Yeah.
hi, I'm Sila here. You mentioned, Rom mentioned, had a word for budding conservationists. What about budding herpetologists? What would you like to say to people who...
Yeah, it's almost the same answer. The opportunities are great, and more so than ever before. And what's amazing is that, I'll just give you an idea of how great it's become. When we came out with the book, Ashok Captain and I came out with a book called Snakes of India, the Field Guide, in 2004. Well, since 2004 till today, 120 new species of snakes have been described in India. 120 new ones. And this is largely, well, I want to say thanks to Ron Whitaker and Ashok Captain. But seriously, just the interest that book had created and the films that we did, you probably know we've done some wildlife documentaries about snakes, has promoted a huge group of people to become interested in herpetology. And not just snakes. We're talking about lizards, crocs, turtles, tortoises, frogs, toads. So herpetology is a very up-and-coming field.
Do you think there are a lot more species of snakes that might be discovered in India?
There certainly must be. And it's not only brand new species, but species which we recognize. For example, the vine snake, the beautiful green snake with the long, slender nose. It's what we called one species then is now been divided into 6 or 7 other species.
Yep.
So these people are called taxonomists. They bug the hell out of me sometimes because they keep splitting snakes up and creating new names for them. But this is just a wonderful opportunity for new herpetologists to get involved.
Rather like the two-headed snake.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Janaki.